Hi guys, I just wanted to introduce my system, which is a smart reminder system, and you know, talk about the related research, the background I went through, the study I did, the technical contributions, just kind of a general overview of my system. So I really want to begin by explaining why I chose to do a smart reminder system. I am pretty disorganized and have always had trouble basically finding a good reminder system to tell me when to do tasks. And at the same time, I feel like it's whenever I do have tasks to do, it's easier for me to break them down into so-called micro tasks. So when I have, a big project and I can break it down into these smaller 1 minute tasks, I feel like it's less work to do them, but it's really hard for me to remind myself if I do small parts. It's hard for me to go through all the steps. So I really wanted to create a system that puts me, that reminds me to do every single step towards achieving a main goal. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the related research that I found on this subject. And so on the subject of microtasking, there has been some really relevant research done, and the ones I'm just going to talk about are regarding task genies and 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 sorry, self-sourcing personal tasks. So Task Genies explores the questions of whether we can utilize crowds to break down tasks so that the overall goal can be achieved more efficiently. And it really supports the premise that crowds will be able to develop somewhat personal plans for others that are executable and efficient. So this is done by a crowd, and in the case of my of the first version that I have of my application, I couldn't really do a crowdsourced task breakdown, and so I looked at another related research, which is a paper called Self-Sourcing Personal Tasks, which explores how individuals themselves can break down individual tasks into microtasks to create a enjoyable and put it positive user experience. While this does deal more specifically with users doing all the work by themselves, it is and it is where I am now. It is important to note that since I have looked into that other research towards like self-sourcing versus crowdsourcing, I do think that a future step it would be really interesting to also include crowdsourcing in my app. So to talk a little bit more about the before I even delve into the technical contribution of my app, I really want to outline what I believe my research explores and what I'm basically trying to find out through the technical system I built. So my research explores how I can use technology and context awareness to remind users to perform tasks in the most efficient manner. So there are many reminder systems, whether it's like the Apple reminder system or others that use location data and maybe the current time of day to notify users when to do a certain task. And these are really great, but it's not very fine-grained locations, and it doesn't allow for very extensive context awareness. So I want to pursue, how can this context awareness help us perform both crowd and self-source task breakdown in order to achieve like the optimal task completion. And to do this, as I said, I really wanted to first focus like one step at a time and look at self-source task breakdown. So I built a smart reminder iOS app in which I had basically two views. In one, the users could add a task and its microtasks. The microtasks are supposed to be 1 minute long, and they could associate these microtasks with small, with locations in the house, such as the kitchen, the living room, the bedroom, and then when they walked around, they had this other view also where they could check, the status of their tasks, like 3 out of 4 micro tasks done for this big goal. And then when they walked around their house, when they left the house, different things, then these micro tasks would be in a queue and would then be pushed up so that the user could be notified to do the micro task. And in this case, they could either do it or they could ignore it. And we're hoping that we can pinpoint, I'm hoping that I can pinpoint the right behavior so that there's a really high acceptance rate. So this was my first prototype, and I used iBeacon technology to do that, which I had worked with before in the previous research that I did. And it was interesting to work with that again, especially because since I had a prior experience, I thought it was going to be a similar process, but turns out I'm working with a much smaller space. I'm now dealing, instead of, in my previous research, I used beacons on the street between definitely 70-meter intervals in the house. When I put the beacons to signify that you're in the bedroom or in the living room, they now have this really small range because you might not live in a really big apartment. And so I was faced with a lot of constraints and kind of just limitations in terms of you can't have too many beacons in the house, and you have to be really careful when you set up the beacons because their range might overlap. And so there's then this case, who should get, if you're walking through in your living room and your kitchen are have an overlap zone and you're in this overlap zone, should you get a notification from the kitchen or should you get a notification from the living room? And so I have to deal with that more closely, and one solution for that could be to do more thorough pre-tracking, in which case whenever you hit a certain beacon area, I actually look at where you are within that zone, and then I check which beacon you're actually closer to, and I can even see what room you're moving into. Like if you're in the hallway and you're moving towards a certain room, but you're not actually in the bedroom, but you trigger the bedroom one, the system should realize that you're not stopping in the bedroom and that you're moving away. But that's just kind of little things I'm noting for what I plan to look into for the future. So I did this. I worked on this system, and by the end of this quarter, I felt like I had a good version 1 done. I've showed it to people in DTR and saw how they interacted with it and fixed the little kinks that they were. And then I had this other user that I went to and I set up the system in her house and saw if she was able to use it. And when that was done, it went really well. I took 3 users and I did a pre-formative study on how users interact with the app. And for about a week, which wasn't a lot of time, and in the future, I do want to do it for a longer period of time. While I haven't finished completely analyzing all the data, I did see that I chose, right now in my system, you can't get a micro task to trigger more than, every, it's spaced by 2 minutes, which ended up being too short, so everything triggered too quickly. And so that's definitely something that I want to reiterate on and make sure it doesn't happen in the future. And I'm happy I did this study because I got to see a lot of the issues that I can now fix, and I got to see how users who are not me interact with the app, which is extremely important. And something that I was really intrigued to is, what is the cost of disruption? Not only the cost of disruption in terms of how, when you move around the house that you're getting pinged too many times, but this is a self-sourced task breakdown, which means that users themselves have to come up with a planned breakdown. So I really wanted to understand if there is a high cost of disruption, and hopefully in the future I do want to move also towards a crowdsourcing aspect. Something else that is kind of important to note is that my research looks into this like overall context awareness, but right now the only thing that I've put as a feature in the current system is a location awareness, and we can even go further next quarter, as I mentioned, with pre-tracking. So right now there's still many aspects of context awareness that will be really useful, that such as, you know, time, or like a time factor, or like intervals of when you want to things to be done, if things are serial or not. And so that's something that will be interesting to look into. So thank you for listening, and I will be uploading another one next quarter, giving you a little briefing of what I've been up to, and I'm sure I will have improved a lot on both my system and looked at further related research to kind of further my hypotheses and my research question. Thanks.